Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we have another great JB&A webinar, and it's really timely because we're going to be talking about managing remote on-premise and hybrid workflows with the EVO from Studio Network Solutions. This is a tremendous solution for so many of our customers, and I'm really excited to be joined by Steve McKenna today to show us more about how the EVO can help you accomplish these hybrid and remote workflows and what the EVO has under the hood to really help you realize those workflows in your own organization. So, Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Let's hear about the EVO today.
Well, thanks for having us, Matt. I'm really excited to kind of show you what we've been working on over the last year, some by necessity, some just an extension of the great workflow tools that we've been providing for the media and entertainment industry for the 23 years that we've been around in business. Now, with the remote workflow stuff coming on, obviously being pushed to the forefront last year for fairly large reason that I don't think any of us want to think too much about anymore. We were able to release Nomad as an addition to our already expansive software suite. So Nomad is our remote editing utility that's going to allow editors on-prem as well as off-site to replicate file folder structures, to keep things in line, to keep media links synced, and will be incredibly important for those users as they come back to an office environment here as the pandemic abates. So Nomad is now complementing our share browser asset management system, as well as our Slingshot automation engine, all of which can be brought together to create one unified solution wherever you may be working, and more important, whatever application you may be using. Different applications have different needs in a remote workflow. Avid Media Composer is very different than Premiere Pro, and SNS's tools and software suite will really accommodate this for anyone.
Cool. So, Steve, you guys have definitely been working on a lot over the pandemic, and I know customers have had a lot of questions. So, let's frame today's discussion. Can you give us kind of the agenda for what we're going to be discussing today?
Yeah, today we're going to get to review the entire EVO suite of tools, including Nomad, which is our remote workflow utility. We're also going to talk about what is about to happen. Obviously, the largest film market in the world, California, as far as content creation, just opened back up on June 16th. So now we're going to have a lot of people who have been working remote and maybe haven't been using the best workflow practices coming back to the office and having to reamalgamate and conform all of the media that was now been generated over the last year. So we're going to talk about some strategies as how to deal with that and how to bring things back on premise. And then we're going to talk about what this looks like going forward. Long-term remote hybrid workflows where we may be on-prem for certain applications. We may now, because of the technologies developed during this pandemic, also have the ability to achieve a little bit better work-life balance, where maybe I don't necessarily need to be in the office every day. These technologies have been proven out, and they're going to continue to get better, both from SNS as well as our technology partners, as the years progress. I don't think remote is going to go away completely. I think we're really going to start to see a hybrid approach where now a video editor and assistant editor may get to use flex time the way the accounting department has done for years. And it's really going to help us push deadlines and be able to do more things without having to run into the office through traffic and all those other things. So I think it's really going to improve efficiency and the amount of content that we can get out in a timely manner.
Fantastic. So, I think we need to take a step back here because, I've worked with EVOs for such a long time, and I know you have too, Steve. So, I might get a little jaded. So let's take a step back and, for people that haven't had that exposure to an EVO, what is an EVO? What is it?
So yeah, Matt, it's always good to start at the beginning. For those of you not familiar with the EVO product lineup, it is SNS's solution for high-speed collaborative editorial or content creation. Going all the way back, we were actually born out of a post-production facility. We worked in audio post. It was a multi-million-dollar recording facility here in St. Louis, and we bought some shared storage all the way back in 1997, and it didn't work. So we had to fix it. And that's really where EVO has come from, is at the time when we did it, it wasn't fast enough to handle what we needed for real-time collaboration and to be able to open and close Pro Tools sessions from one room to another. So the first thing we solved was speed for audio files, and a way to get non-network aware softwares and non-network native softwares to be able to collaboratively share content safely. Over the years, however, it became evident that speed was never going to be just enough. Even as collaboration, as video codecs and data rates got larger, while we were always fast enough, our customers demanded more. They needed to be able to search their files. They needed to be able to index and organize files as we started to work in places like scripted reality or unscripted, whatever the case may be. The amount of content that was being generated there in the early 2000s was immense. And so often what we would find is customers would have to buy 2 or 3 or 4 solutions to get through a workflow when all they really wanted was one thing that gave them some basic ability to organize their media. And that's where our share browser asset management came from. As is always the case, as Share Browser was released, there were more requests to do things, to be able to search in more detail against frame rates, to be able to identify and group content together in what we call bins. With each challenge that our customers present to SNS, we try to develop in-house a way to solve it so that we can give a robust all-in-one solution that makes it very easy not only to manage the system coming from one vendor and one support contract, but also very intuitive to the user base. So we're constantly engaged with our customers to be ever evolving our product line, which is also why we use the name EVO.
Thank you for that background, Steve. And another thing that's always surprised me about working with EVOs is just the variety of customers we get to work with when we sell EVOs. And I think that's a really important point to hone in on. So, Steve, can you give everyone an idea of kind of who's using an EVO, or where are you going to see it out in the wild these days?
Oh man, with content creation going crazy, where aren't you going to see an EVO? Everyone is making video, everyone is making audio. Again, going back to kind of our roots, it was audio post-production. That's where you would see it. We had a lot of servers in Nashville, LA, New York, then television production, kind of those traditional markets. But as video has grown and as corporations have brought marketing teams in-house, we work with Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies, boutique production companies, marketing agencies. E-gaming has been creating a ton of content over the last several years and growing like crazy. Professional sports, broadcast, really everywhere as these file-based workflows and things happening over the traditional Ethernet network have been adopted and these technologies converge. SNS has found itself right in the center of all of that, which has also really helped to drive, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the developmental tools that we use and a lot of the software suite. And we're committed, as we've always been, to that software being free in unlimited fashion for our user base. So in the academic environments, it's incredibly popular because they'll light up multi-hundred person labs and have no software licensing fees. So regardless of what you're doing or how you're creating content and what your team needs to do, EVO has something for you, from direct NLE integrations to automation and workflow tools, and we can run over some of the names of them. We have kind of umbrella terms for everything. So the EVO is always our hardware, right? That's our high-speed performance-oriented storage, but it comes in 2 tiers. It comes in an online tier and a nearline tier. So you can use it for backup. You can use it for real-time editorial over incredibly large teams, supporting 4K, 8K, 16K, DPX, EXR sequences. But then the software suite around it includes Share Browser, the asset management, which is one of the more open asset management systems on the market today. Not only do we interact and index our own storage, but anything else on the network that you would like us to. Obviously, for permissions and security, you may not want us indexing everything. But that's what's so unique to EVO is that it's malleable. Its workflows are malleable to our customers' workflows. We custom design these things, and we consult with you on the workflow piece. So in addition to the asset management, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Slingshot automation engine and REST API, which is also free and no additional charge, allowing customers to also build on top of our workflows. So if there's something that's custom to their environment, which is one of the things that corporations, especially technology corporations, find so intriguing about the EVO, is that they have a rich set of tools to customize things for their platforms. And then we obviously have Nomad, our remote edit utility, which is the heart of why we're here today. And for those of our customers who have been using Nomad, I will say that coming back to the office is going to be even simpler than it would be had you not been.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So, that's a lot. The EVO does a whole lot of things. And, there's a lot of other shared storage solutions out there, but I'm not sure any of them really even come close to what the Evo is doing. So let's hone in on those kind of workflows that Evo can help people realize. Can you talk about some of the stuff that the Evo can help with?
Absolutely. I mean, I certainly don't think any of our competition comes close. So, EVO is going to allow you, again, in an unlimited way, to organize media, tag, index, automate, get through things, and do so in a way that doesn't require retraining your editors or your creative team in general. Whether it's as simple as, hey, the asset management has a web app, so non creative users can now review the entire content library that we've ever generated and make requests of the video team in a much more streamlined fashion, all the way down to, I need to edit 6 layers of ProRes in a crazy multicam sequence, and that needs to be gotten from the field yesterday. Evo is there to push those boundaries. And again, Matt, the workflows, while they're important in their own right, the native and ease of use of the in-app integrations is really important as well. So in Premiere, for instance, a lot of systems, if you're dealing with asset management or you're dealing with a separate software, require you to enter that software. Share Browser allows you to natively interact with the database and the files on your system through a plugin or a panel for Premiere, workflow extensions for Blackmagic Resolve, for After Effects, and also for Apple's Final Cut Pro. So regardless of what application you're using, Share Browser is there for you, and it's there that when we bring assets from the asset management software into our application, that the metadata does an automatic XML exchange in the background to allow that metadata to come into the application. So now it's right where a user expects it. Even if someone's never used Share Browser before, if you get a clip from our MAM, your metadata is going to be in your production app the way you've always been trained to use that. So it's that intuitive nature that makes it so powerful.
All right, so Steve, throughout all of the craziness that's happened in the past couple of years, there's been one big announcement from SNS around the cloud VPN from SNS. Can you explain that a little bit? Because I think it has implications that people haven't really fully realized yet.
Absolutely. And it really does. I think you're right. Our VPN, well, it is a VPN service that we released a couple of months after we released Nomad, the remote workflow utility. It's not your normal VPN. It's not something that's going to let you just dial into the network in its entirety. We released it with security in mind because a lot of our clients obviously work on highly secure content, whether that might be an original show for a major broadcaster or whether that be a Super Bowl commercial for a major company. We can't let this footage get out. So using things like Dropbox or letting people just go grab files from a generic service, file sharing service, was unacceptable and didn't meet the security requirements. Or a lot of our smaller, more boutique clients also couldn't set up a VPN. So they had no way to connect their server to their remote user, to incorporate them into their local area network. And they were afraid to do so. Because if I let you into my network, you can see all the devices in my network. So what the SNS cloud-hosted VPN was the answer to that challenge. And it's simply that we put the VPN server into a cloud instance and use the EVO device, the on-prem server that hosts our database and allows our searchability and all of our other great workflow tools to become a client. So now, if I grant someone access through the SNS VPN, I don't grant them access to my network. I grant them access to the content that I have hired them to work on, without fear of any, stretching or getting into places they shouldn't. So it's very easy and it's very targeted to be set up. Even some of our very large corporate clients, their IT VPNs weren't sufficient for what was happening with media. So they lit up our VPN alongside. It's incredibly affordable, and just like all of our software, comes with no per-seat fees. Now, there is a monthly fee to the VPN. It's metered data, but it's been incredibly popular with our clients, and I encourage all of you to go check it out on the website. We have some great case studies about people using it. And if you were using the SNS VPN and you were using SNS's Nomad remote workflow utility, as I said, coming home is going to be really easy because all your files are where they're at. But for those of you who hadn't gotten a chance to use that yet or didn't have our server in place, I'm certainly excited to talk to you about what that's going to look like and how our tools can help with that as well.
Awesome. So, this now we've kind of covered what the Evo is and the heart of the system and what people can expect as far as a feature set goes. Now we can transition into the heart of today's webinar, which is addressing the issue of migrating data that everybody is doing. And it's unfortunate where we all panicked and everybody had to enable remote workflows, but now we're experiencing the opposite problem, right? Everybody's coming back to work. So what are you seeing at SNS, and what are the things that you guys are doing to address these issues of data migration that's just exploded this year?
Yeah, uh, it is a challenge. And again, for our existing clients, we were able to release Nomad very quickly. We were able to release the VPN service. So for those users, coming home is going to be really easy because of the way our utility works and the kind of the creative way we solved the problem in the beginning. Now, for those without our tools, there were several ways that I saw this get dealt with last year, and they evolved over time as well. The first reaction to something that was so abrupt, things just closed, was everyone grab a drive, take your footage home. And that was certainly the first way to get things done. Now, some more, we won't say advanced companies, but some of a little more IT staff and things like that were able to move some footage into the cloud. Some people are able to use Dropbox, which I referenced earlier, to create at least a central repository that people could download their high-res from. The challenge was, though, regardless of which path you took, you still had to get media to someone's remote location. The other way that people did this with remote desktop connectivity, and editors had to suffer through, shall we say, less than ideal scrubbing performance. So we had to start to tolerate things not being as smooth or easy as they were. For those using those remote desktop softwares like HP Z Central or a Teradici workflow, at least our files were still correct. Nothing has changed. Again, coming back on-prem should be a fairly seamless process, except for that content that was created outside of our environment. We still went out and we shot stuff. Things had to get done. So for that new content, Slingshot within EVO provides an automation to bring things into the file structure of your server on-prem. Because not only does our asset management system index and work with other things, it adds the ability to actually automate from other devices as well. So whether that be a field drive that someone was using, a little NAS that they got for themselves, a direct attached RAID, we can simply now plug those devices into the network somewhere. That could be through a workstation, it could be into the server directly, and EVO will automate the push back and bring those files onto itself, alerting people that they're now ready to be organized. For those of us who had to actually bring files home, we downloaded them from Dropbox, or we went and bought a bunch of drives and duplicated our media everywhere. Well, now we have people working alone. And when they did that, they created their own file structures, their own naming conventions to keep things organized for them, maybe without as much oversight from the central post supervisor as there would have been in the office, which means now as projects come back, the media is not in the same path. So again, with Slingshot, by migrating that media back onto a server, honoring the file folder path that was created by the remote editor, we can keep those media links in sync and simply relink at the highest level, at the root level of a folder or a project file folder structure. Now, for those who had to duplicate media across a bunch of things, we're going to need to decide who was right and get there. We also have an incredible lack of systemic metadata. One logger, someone organizing something in their Premiere project, may have called a shot one thing while another person may have called a shot another thing, and they've both learned over the last 15 months the thing that they called it. One might be car, one might be automobile, one might be Mercedes-Benz, whatever. But if they've been logging in an Adobe application, in Prelude, for instance, or Bridge for graphic designers, Share Browser also scrapes that XMP metadata into its own database. So once we move that data onto the server, or even if we don't, we just get it indexed by the database, all of those tags, when those editors search for what they're looking for what they call it at home, we'll be able to find it in a seamless manner. And then we can create a more standardized set of metadata using Share Browser's built-in tagging to be able to add those things recursively across folders so that we don't have to necessarily go clip by clip for every piece of content that was created while we were out of the office. So it's a way to kind of take the jumble, get it loosely organized, and then continue to streamline that and refine it as we get back to an on-prem workflow. And for those clients who do get the EVO, this will never be a problem again, because you're going to get to use Nomad so that that file folder structure back at the office is now going to become our source of truth, and we're going to disseminate from there. So whether you had EVO in the past or whether you get an EVO now to help you organize things and you come back, like I said, our tools are always going to be there to help. So the other challenge is, what if we have no metadata at all? What if no one did any logging? We just were lucky to get our projects out. So for those clients who were able to leverage cloud services like AWS S3 last year, AWS also has recognition. Share Browser has hooks built in for that. So as this footage comes back in, as it's brought into the system, it's indexed or it's indexed where it lives, Share Browser will actually send files off to the cloud to be auto-tagged. So even if we don't want to spend the time to catch up and do all the tagging, we can let the machines do it for us. And a lot of those AI engines got so much smarter last year because they had to. So we're excited to allow our clients to avail themselves of that technology as well without any additional charge from us.
Fantastic. As we're looking at the industry as a whole, Steve, a few years ago, we saw everybody running to the cloud, right? And now we're starting to see people starting to come back or having some sort of a hybrid approach to this. So I'm sure it's a bit sweet as a hardware manufacturer to have people realizing how much a hybrid approach really is needed in most workflows. So what are the trends you guys are seeing at SNS?
So what we're seeing is now a natural reaction to having time to deal with a problem. At first, there was a scramble. Got to get stuff out. Don't have a choice. Some people jumped to an entirely cloud workflow. Other companies certainly created workflows that were based solely on that. Now what we're finding is that people have had time to digest those workflows and realize that a balance of on-prem hardware, whether those be editing stations or whether those be on-prem shared storage servers like our own and software, coupled with what the cloud can provide from a decentralized nature and provide the flexibility for, is the best way to go. Because so many of the cloud services can be incredibly expensive over time, or even in the short term, to have to take everything into the cloud. One of the things that was really interesting to see was the evolution of the entirely cloud workflow, media in the cloud and workstation in the cloud. What was sadly predictable was the bill coming back. We have clients who are spending in excess of 5 figures a month just to have 5 or 6 editors working entirely in the cloud to do that. And when they started to really look at those costs, especially considering they had recently bought new Mac Pros or high-end editing stations, to have to pay for a workstation twice made no sense. To have to pay for extreme render credits or processing in the cloud when our traditional video workstations are so powerful, it made a lot more sense to render locally, do conforming and things like that against your local network and local high-speed storage than it did to do everything in the cloud. So by balancing on-prem things that you own and cloud things that you generally rent and can scale up quickly as needed, to leverage both of those in an appropriate way can really help clients control both their operating expenses as well as their capital expenses and really budget for the future while providing a lot of power regardless of where you may be. And for those of you out there that are kind of confused by it all, because there are so many clouds these days and not all clouds are the same, and what can I do on-prem? SNS also offers workflow consultation services. So whether you're talking to our sales team or one of our workflow engineers, or whether you buy our server or not, you can call and just kind of chat through it, and we'll talk to you about whatever challenges you have and how we would look to approach them, or set you up with one of our integrators or dealers worldwide that can help as well and bring other solutions to bear. So whether you just need to talk about storage workflow or you need to get into broadcast, we're certainly a good place to start looking for all of those things. And that's what's so neat too, Matt, is hybrid really is the new cloud. I might be a multinational corporation. I don't need somebody else's 10 data centers. I have 10 offices myself on 3 different continents. So I can actually locate hardware in those offices and fundamentally build my own kind of media cloud. Obviously, with a capital expense, I can amortize that over the life of the product or the life of the project and what we're doing, as opposed to renting it and having my costs scale along with my content creation needs. Once I own something, obviously that becomes a fixed cost, and things going forward then get cheaper the longer I can use stuff.
Great. So, you talked a little bit about time and how there's a big, benefit that we now have of having gone through a big change, and we've had a year plus now to look at things. So now we're starting to see people not, go through the panic mode of having to stand something up very quickly, but now starting to look at how they're going to enable a new way of working. Are you seeing the same thing?
Absolutely. We are. So people, like I said, there may be now we have the technology, we have the infrastructure built to be able to allow people to work from home. Now, working from home on 8K video is never going to be as fast as working in the office. But if I need to do it one day out of the week, I have an appointment or something like that that I need to do, again, that better work-life balance, the building blocks for that are there now. They weren't there before. So whether you're doing it from a work-life balance to attract better talent, to offer your employees a better mix, or whether you're just doing it to expand the talent pool, to get more freelancers from diverse locations, diverse backgrounds, be able to leverage local talent as well as more centralized talent in some of the bigger markets. This hybridization of remote workflow versus on-prem workflow, that line is really blurred. And our tools are going to provide that going forward. Just because the pandemic's over doesn't mean everyone needs to rush back into the office. And just because the pandemic's over doesn't mean no one wants to go into the office. There are benefits to both, and we're not here to stand in the way. It's really about our clients and what they choose and the way they choose to work. So some people are not going to go back to the office. One of the things that we found was a huge trend, especially in the higher rent markets, was people gave up their office space entirely. They said, we found a way to work remote. I don't need to pay for this expensive office building or WeWork or whatever the case may be to get the job done. So let's decentralize this whole thing. And SNS has provided the tools for that as well. We've been putting EVOs, I can't believe we did this, to be honest with you, but we've been putting high performance shared storage servers into central producers' homes. They get a rack, they get a quiet rack, and now they can be the workflow hub for kind of the rest of the organization. Some people have rented cage space or colo spaces in more traditional data centers to put our equipment in to allow central access for editors across the globe. I used to get, hey, I've got 6 or 7 people that need to work. Now I've got 6 or 7 people, but they're on 6 different continents. And so by locating the server centrally and leveraging, again, kind of those hybrid workflows that we talked about, we can really provide a permanent solution for those who either don't have an office, can't get back to the office, or need to do both. It doesn't really matter. And the really nice thing with our system is the way Nomad works. It works in such a manner that we're using a very traditional kind of offline online workflow, proxy workflow, whatever you call it, that I would say is kind of a legacy from when even on-prem networks weren't fast enough. Now what we've done is we've extended that over the wide area network. So while on-prem networks, especially those with an EVO behind them, are more than fast enough to allow whatever video editorial you want to happen in the highest resolution you can imagine, those remote workflows have that natural wide area network bottleneck in between them. So we went back to a tried and true way to give those remote editors the feel as if they're working locally, but allow them to conform against the high res, whether that be over the wide area network or with the SNS Cloud VPN service, to actually have an end-to-end completely set up by one vendor solution that they can trust and go with. So our VPN is secure, uses a zero trust client, so whether you just need to get connected to 2 things, whether you need to have that stuff organized because you're decentralized everywhere else, or you need to be able to automate things to also use the network at off hours. If you're fully remote, ingest becomes a problem. How are you going to get the data to the server? Wouldn't it be really nice to use an automation engine that says, hey, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., I'm going to grab whatever footage we don't have and look for new stuff and just record those deltas? Well, for SNS clients, you do have that.
Steve, that is all fantastic information. I know people are struggling a lot with what to do, so I'm glad that, hopefully they realize they have a lot of resources here at JB&A and with you at SNS. So, if there are any questions, we're definitely here for you. So, are there any things you can wrap up with, Steve?
Absolutely, man. I mean, it's really just to reiterate that we use those open architectures. Our software is free and unlimited fashion. So you've got asset management, you've got automation. Things that would take 4 or 5 other products to do can all be done in one solution with SNS. And even more so, you can augment. There are some products that are very specialized in their task that often look like we do something very similar or they do something very similar and they're the same, but they're not. And because we have an open architecture, it's very easy for us to integrate with third-party specialized equipment, generic IT equipment, or whatever else our customers need us to interact with. One thing about being the server is we're kind of the center of everything. So it's always good to play nice with others, I guess. And that's really the thing. And then the other side of it that I would wrap up with is the incredible strength I think that we've shown throughout the pandemic here, and quite frankly, for the last 23 years that we've been in business. This commitment to development, to pushing the envelope, to listening to our clients. So back to kind of our workflow consultation and the wrap up too. Even if you don't need an EVO, give us a shout. We'll probably know something that can help you. There are probably a lot of EVO tools. One of the things we like to talk about in our trainings for new people who get our product, because we do offer product-specific training, is bring a list of the things that drive you crazy. No item is too big or too small. We can't always promise we have an answer for everything, but if it's a video workflow-related problem and not a personal one, you got a pretty good shot that EVO is going to make it better.
That's great, Steve. So thank you so much. I was hoping you'd be able to help my personal issues, but we've already talked about that. It's too much for you or SNS. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it happens to the best of us. Always feel free to give me a call, though. I'll still listen.
All right, perfect. So, perfect. Well, let's roll into the Q&A from here. So if people have any questions, they can submit them in the chat to us.
I'm really excited to take questions from everyone. I'm excited to see what kind of technology you guys are using, how we can integrate with it. Really looking forward to helping you solve whatever challenges are keeping you up at night.